Well, hi and welcome once again to session 6 of our 5-minute guides to the Bible. In session 5, we saw that for modern English speakers, the early Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek copies of the original Bible documents have to be clearly understood. Fortunately, we have access to accurate ancient copies of these books. From these early copies, language experts can take the next step of translating the Hebrew, Aramaic, or Greek into an English that is both accessible and accurate. So in this session, we're going to be examining some of the issues that go into making a readable translation of the Bible. So here are a few of the factors that Bible translators must consider when working on the Hebrew and Aramaic of the Old Testament manuscripts or the Greek New Testament manuscripts. First is the basic decision of whether the version is going to be a fresh translation from the early manuscripts themselves or a reworked version of a previous translation. Now, there are reasons why a translation team may go for either choice. Obviously, a fresh translation has all the advantages of being, well, fresh. It doesn't have the decisions of the previous translators to worry about or to try to work with. Many translations like the New International or the New American Standard Version went back to the ancient documents and started fresh. But on the other hand, why would a group want to use an existing version as a starting point? Is that just laziness? Well, there are certain reasons why a reworked version might be the best choice. Let's take the example of the New King James Version. The King James Version, more properly known as the Authorized Version, was completed in 1611. And at the time, this version was quite understandable to most English speakers. And it remained the standard English Bible for the best part of 3 centuries. But English has developed and changed considerably over the past 400 years, so that now the language of the King James seems quaint at best and is often hard for the average English speaker to understand. Yet it has a certain elegance, and in my own ministry, when I've performed funerals for elderly people who grew up in church, I often use the King James, both because it was what they knew and loved, but also because the beauty of the words seems to raise the level of tribute that I'm able to give to the lives of these dear people. So the New King James is a sort of compromise. It attempts to update the hard English passages of the Old King James and correct some of the errors made by the 1611 translators while retaining the elegance of the 1611 language. A second key factor is the theological point of view. Bible translators come from a spectrum of churches and theological viewpoints, and some take the Bible to be inspired and authoritative for contemporary life, while others see it as just an ancient book with some important lessons, but it's not authoritative. Some approach translation with a certain agenda in mind, such as gender neutrality or skepticism of the miracles and the supernatural. These viewpoints matter in the way the Bible translation comes out because theological perspectives and even social views of the translators will determine many of the decisions that they make along the way in the translation process. Then there's the issue of target audience. Who will the translation reach? What gap will it fill? What need will it meet? The New American Standard Version was an attempt to put the Bible into the language of North Americans. More about that translation in a moment. The New International Version was an attempt to translate the Bible into a very generic English that could be read in Australia, South Africa, the United States, Canada, or Great Britain. And finally, there's the factor of literal approach or an emphasis on readability. So if you know at least 2 languages, you'll immediately agree that translation can never be 100% literal. You have to sort of fiddle with the languages to get an accurate translation of ideas. But some translations are more word for word than others. The New American Standard Version was meant to be for American readers, but it turned out to be one of the most word for word translations available. However, as accurate as it may be, the English is a bit awkward sometimes even for the American audience it was intended for. On the other hand, the Living Bible is a good example of the readability side. While the main ideas are there, it's not designed for close word-for-word accuracy. But if you want a read that's effortless in English, the Living Bible is your best choice. In the middle are what are called concept-for-concept translations. The New International Version is a prime example of this trade-off between readability and accuracy. So I'm going to give you right now a spectrum of English Bible translations, and I'm going to list the different word-for-word translations, the different thought-for-thought translations, and the paraphrases. And I will do that in the form of a graph that I'll put up at this point. You can pause the video if you'd like, and then restart it when you're ready to move on. I realize this is a ton of information. You may want to replay the video to get it all. In the next session, we're going to be comparing some of the main English versions of the Bible, like the King James, the New American Standard, the New International, and others. And each of these main versions has its purpose, its history, its strong points, and so forth. Until then, this is Dr. Michael Bogart for the 5-Minute Guides to the Bible.